Rain hammered the canopy in thick, slanted sheets, turning the jungle into a breathing, humid chamber. Captain Lin Vo lay prone on the slick wooden platform she'd lashed high into the strangler fig, cheek welded to the stock of her suppressed M110, scope glass beaded with water. Below, through layers of palm and mist, muzzle flashes flared like angry fireflies around the pinned seal element. Their SOS pulsed in her earpiece, broken, desperate, stepping on its own transmission. Kilo 3, troops in contact, multiple, grid. Static ate the rest. Her left hand, the one on the trigger guard, had gone pale at the knuckles. To take the shot, she had to light up a priority target inside the village edge. But the man was using a teenager as a half-shield, half-guide. ROE said positive ID, no non-combatant risk. The SEALs were already down to guttering gunfire, their position collapsing behind a half-overturned dugout. If she held fire, Kilo 3 would get rolled. If she broke ROE, she would burn the last scrap of trust the task force still had in her. A shape in rain-black fatigues raised an RPG tube toward the SEAL line. Lin exhaled once, slow. Hard cut. 18 hours earlier. Fob Rook sat like a scraped knuckle at the edge of the jungle. Hesco walls beating with condensation. Generator noise dull under the weight of oncoming weather. Captain Lin Vo crossed the gravel in her rain top, helmet clipped to her assault pack, rifle case knocking her knee. The sky to the south was already a heaving gray slab. Bad for air, worse for satellites. Bad for anyone who wanted clean eyes on a village buried under trees. Inside the command tent, the air was cooler but tighter. Radios murmured. A map of Narayan district was pinned across the display, red grease pencil marking the river and the target village. Majaran Harris stood with arms folded, sleeves crisp even out here, eyes flicking between a weather feed and the op board. "You're telling me you want to put 2 people in a tree," he said without preamble as Lin stepped in, "when I have a perfectly good UAV on deck." Lin slid her case down, kept her hands visible and calm. "Sir, the canopy is denser than on imagery. We saw that on the last patrol. UAV is going to give you a green tunnel and not much else." Ortiz, already inside, leaned on the back wall, chewing a pen. She gave Lin the smallest nod. "Go on." Harris tapped the village circle. "Civilians in play. That means ROE is tight. I don't want a shooter forward who can't see the whole picture." That jab was for her, not for any theoretical shooter. Lin felt it land. A year ago she would have flinched. Now she made herself meet his eyes. "I read the ROE addendum, sir. PID, no fires into structures without C2. I can live with that." She let a beat pass. "But Kilo needs immediate suppression if they're compromised en route. The drone won't punch through foliage in this weather. A human eye will." Harris's jaw flexed. "You're still on probation, Captain." There it was. The ghost of the old mission. The one with the delayed shot and the dead man on the landing. Lin let the shame wash through and go. "Yes, sir. Which is why I'm volunteering for the hard job, not the easy one." Ortiz spoke up, her voice steady. "I'll spot for her, Major. We keep our footprint light. No fires without your call unless it's clearly hostile act." Harris looked between them. Outside, thunder rolled, flattening for a moment the buzz of the ops floor. He exhaled through his nose. "You'll be at least 800 meters out," he said. "You will not fire into that village unless I say so. You will maintain radio discipline. If comms degrade, you hold. Kilo is primary. You are support. Copy?" "Copy," Lin said too quickly. She forced herself to slow. "We can rig a high hide to counter the terrain." Harris uncrossed his arms. but the approval was only partial. You get one shot at proving you can operate under constraint, Captain. I don't have appetite for another AR-15 page with your name on it. Yes, sir. He turned away to talk to Air, signal that the conversation was over. Ortiz pushed off the wall and fell in step with Lynn as she exited the tent. The air outside felt thicker, the sky lower. Could have just said, "Thanks for saving our seals in advance," Ortiz muttered. Lynn huffed a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. He's not wrong. I have to be perfect. Perfect is for robots. We're going to be wet, bitten, and hungry in a tree. They walked past the helipad where the MH-60 variant sat under tarp, crew chief checking tie-downs before the storm. Lynn pictured the route in. Drop for Kilo along the river finger. Then she and Ortiz peel farther north to the high ground. From there, she could see the approach trail. If things went bad, she could do what she was supposed to have done a year ago. Act. Ortiz bumped her shoulder. Hey, you got this. Lynn looked toward the jungle, dark as a closed fist. We'd better. Nobody else is going to be close enough. Above them, the first fat drops of rain began to fall. Advance guard of the storm that would, 18 hours later, swallow their signals and leave a SEAL team calling for help no one could hear. By 0200 local, the rain had settled into a steady drumming on the FOB's canvas roofs, a sound that made radio chatter feel small. Captain Linvo stood beside the ops tent with her headset on, helmet buckled now, watching the flight crew move around the dark, blade-slung bulk of the helicopter. Rotor blades were tied, nav lights dimmed, the bird wearing the storm like a cloak. Inside her ear, the weather tech finished his update. Cell accelerated. You've got maybe 45 minutes before the ceiling drops below safe on egress. My geez, Harris's voice followed, clipped. That means you launch now, or we scrub. Kilo, 6 men in wet black uniforms, moved in a practiced line toward the helicopter. Dr. Josh Bishop Keene walked point, bearded, eyes up, as if he were already under Canopy. He spotted Lynn and diverted just enough to speak without breaking stride. Overwatch, you good? He asked, voice low so it wouldn't carry to the ops staff. Good, Lynn said. We'll be 10 mics behind you on foot once we get dropped north. Expect spot reports every 15. He nodded once, satisfied that at least someone would be out there with them. Then he climbed aboard. Harris emerged from the tent, rain blotting his sleeves now. Last chance, he said to Lynn, not quite challenging, more like logging her decision. We can hold till daylight. You'll get better eyes then. If we hold, the courier's gone, Lynn said. He only meets at dawn when the river traffic's thick. That was in the pattern of life packet. Which we can rebuild, Harris said. Not if they realize Kilo even tried to come in tonight, she countered. Sir, bad comms I can work around. No target I can't. There was half a second where he could have said no. Instead, he jerked his chin at the bird. Fine, radio discipline. If SATCOM drops, you stick to prearranged windows. I don't want you eating up bandwidth calling play-by-play. Copy, Lynn said. Ortiz trotted up, rucksack riding high, spotter scope tucked. Bird Chief says we ride in the back, jump at RP2, she said, breath fogging. He can't swing wide to the north, winds are ugly. Noted, Lynn said, to Harris. We'll establish the first window at 0315. If you don't hear from us, assume we're moving an enemy in vicinity. Understood, Harris said, but his eyes said, don't make me explain you again. They climbed aboard. The interior smelled of hydraulic fluid and canvas, everything damp. Lynn strapped in opposite Ortiz. Across from them, One of the SEALs checked his suppressed carbine, not really looking at them, but Lynn caught the flicker of recognition. Sniper team. Good. Another asset between him and dying in someone else's village. The bird lifted into rain, rotors beating the water flat. At low level, the world outside the open door was only black, streaked with jungle canopy, Ghost River glinting, and occasional lightning fattening the clouds. The crew chief held up 2 fingers. 2 minutes. In her headset, the SATCOM feed crackled. Rook to all stations, be advised. Atmospheric attenuation is increasing. Then a smear of static ate the end. Lynn glanced at Ortiz. This is what I meant. Yeah, Ortiz said, tightening her chin strap. Green tunnel. They flared over the river finger, barely above treetop. The SEALs spilled out with practiced, silent speed, boots finding. Mud forming their file, disappearing into foliage that seemed to swallow light. Bishop looked up once, hand to ear, checking his own comms. Lynn gave him a thumbs up he probably didn't see. The pilot banked north, lower still, to drop Lynn and Ortiz closer to the rise she'd picked on the map. Rain hit her face as she jumped, knees bending, rifle case slamming her thigh. Jungle smell, earth, rot, water rose around them. Behind them, the helicopter's sound faded fast. No loiter, just like the forecast. Ortiz listened to her radio. Rook, this is Overwatch, on ground at RP2, moving to hide. Comms check, over? Static, then Harris, thinner now. Rook copies. Intermittent, windows only, ROE unchanged. Copy, ROE unchanged, Lynn said. She killed her mic and looked to the dark line of trees that led toward the village. We hustle. If the weather gets worse, we're the only thing Kilo has. They moved, hunched under the dripping canopy. Behind them, somewhere to the south, 6 SEALs threaded their own path toward an objective that might already be waking up. The storm had stolen most of the task force's eyes. That meant the ones in Lynn's head, and the ones through her scope, would have to be enough. The jungle deepened around them until even the storm sounded far away. Just a muffled roar above layers of leaves. Captain's Lynn Vo checked her GPS once, saw the icon drift slightly off the satellite image she'd memorized, and grimaced. The actual ground rose sooner than the map said, a long, slick shoulder of earth that forced them to skirt left. Imagery lied, Ortiz said behind her, voice low, almost amused. Water dripped off her boonie hat. Again. Canopy thickened since the last pass, Lynn said. Monsoon growth. Happens. It mattered because from the fob she'd picked a clean lane, a gap in the trees that gave her a view of the approach trail leading into the river village. Standing here now, she saw why the UAV had looked optimistic. Secondary growth had filled the lane, and a big strangler fig had sent down fresh curtains of roots. From ground level, the trail was a tunnel. She scanned upward. The fig's main arms spread wide, 30 feet up, where wind had pruned some branches and offered slivers of sightlines. Higher was always more visible, more exposed, but it would let her shoot. Ortiz followed her gaze. You're thinking tree. I'm thinking we don't matter if we can't see, Lynn said. She pushed a leaf aside, peering toward where she knew the village perimeter sat. Just gray-green blur. We set on the ground. We'll have to move the second they start shooting. Up there, we can ride the fight. Also up there, we're a lightning rod if they figure out someone's plinking them, Ortiz said. But there was no real protest, just making sure the risks were named. Lynn weighed it. Safer ground hide. More cover, less. Reach. High hide. Wider arc. Faster target acquisition. But once they fired, enemy scouts would look up. And today, the enemy was alert. Kilo's presence wasn't going to stay secret. She heard Harris again. You are support. You will maintain radio discipline. But none of that mattered if her muzzle couldn't even find a target. We go up, she decided. We keep the profile tight. No white light, no metal noise. Roger, Ortiz said, already shrugging out of her pack and pulling coil rope. They worked quickly. Lynn tested the trunk with her gloved hand. Wet, mossy, but wide enough. She slung the M110, clipped in, and climbed, boots finding purchase on thick lianas. The humid air wrapped her, smelling of sap and wet bark. 30 feet up, she found the natural platform she'd seen from below, a crook of branches broad enough for two prone bodies if they stayed disciplined. She hauled herself over, then leaned down to take Ortiz's pack, then Ortiz herself. They lashed together a narrow firing shelf from webbing and a lightweight camo net, draping it to break their outline without blocking the scope. Rain spattered through, but better wet than seen. Lynn laid out her rifle, checked the suppressor, then set the laser rangefinder beside it. Battery indicator. Not full. The storm had made every device work harder. We minimize lacing, she said, only for priority. I don't want to burn through this and go Kentucky windage on moving targets. Copy. I'll mill through the scope when I can, Ortiz said, glassing through her spotting scope. Okay. Your trail is there. She pointed with 2 fingers, never touching the barrel. But look, it doglegs before the village. That bend wasn't on the imagery. Lynn looked. Sure enough, the footpath split around a fallen tree, making a blind pocket where someone could park an RPG team and wait. Whoever had cut that detour knew what they were doing. ROE echoed in her head. No fires into the village proper without PID and command acknowledgement. Out here, though, on the approach, in the tree line, she had more leeway. Hostile act or intent, she could act. This is good, she murmured. If they set up to hit Kilo here, we can break it. Assuming Kilo knows the trail's changed, Ortiz said. Yeah. Lynn's mouth tightened. Comms had been intermittent even on the bird. By the time Kilo hit this bend, it might be worse. She glassed south, toward where the seals would be pushing. Shapes in rain green moved far off, too far to ID, no silhouettes against the trunks. She adjusted her scope, slow, patient. Then she saw it. Not the seals, but 2 men in mismatched fatigues moving across the trail, perpendicular, not along it. One carried something long and wrapped. Could be just a fishing pole. Could be a weapon. They paused at the bend, looked toward the village, then slipped into cover on either side. Contact, potential L-shaped, Lynn said softly. They're setting for someone. Ortiz exhaled. They're awake. Lynn's finger rested alongside the rifle, not on the trigger. From up here, they had angles. They had eyes. If Kilo walked into that bend blind, Lynn could reach down and change the outcome, which meant, for once, she'd chosen right. Log it, she said. Next comms window, we warn them. If we can't raise them, then it's on us. Ortiz finished. Rain pattered on the netting. Below, the jungle waited. The jungle looked harmless from 30 feet up, just wet leaves and a narrow footpath disappearing into mist. But Captain Lin Vo had watched too many patrols to believe in harmless. Men who were just passing through didn't take opposite sides of a bend and settle their weight like that. She checked the time. Next comms window in 2 minutes. Movement, right flank, Ortiz whispered, glass to eye. Second pair, that's 4 total. They're building depth, Lynn said. Not just security. That meant someone had fed them a route. Maybe not Kilo's exact line of drift, but close enough to make this trail a good place to hurt people. Rain came harder, drumming on the camo net. Her earpiece hissed, then caught a fragment. Rook to Overwatch, window, copy. Rook, Overwatch. I read you weak but readable, Lynn said, keying up. She kept it short, the way Harris wanted. We have suspicious movement vicinity trail north of OBJ. Possible hasty ambush. Recommend you relay to Kilo, over. Static chewed her words. The reply arrived in tatters. Copy possible. Say again, grid. Of course. The one time she needed clean numbers. She could give them the grid in 2 seconds, but that meant staying on the net, pushing more than the handshakes they'd planned. That was exactly what Harris didn't want. Long transmissions from a forward, exposed element. Long transmissions that could be direction found. Ortiz was watching her, eyebrow raised. They don't have it. I know. She looked back down the trail. One of the men below adjusted his wrapped bundle. This time she saw the end of it. Flared, wood dark. Not a fishing pole. Probably an RPG or at least a launcher tube. Not pointed yet. Waiting. If Kilo walked into that turn, the first 2 in the file would eat it. Her thumb hovered over the transmit. Harris would log the overtransmit. He'd be right to. But he wasn't looking at 4 men under her, who'd chosen this spot for a reason. Lynn keyed up again. Rook, Overwatch, break, she said, and didn't let go. Grid as follows. She read it slow enough to be clear, fast enough to be hard to triangulate, gave landmark references, fallen teak, dogleg north of village, insurgent presence both sides of trail, then added what she wasn't supposed to add. Advise Kilo to detour west 50 meters to avoid likely kill zone. Over. Ortiz winced but kept spotting. Static, then Harris's voice, thinner, annoyed. Overwatch, Rook, you are exceeding window. Maintain discipline. We will relay. Out. Copy, Lynn said, keeping her own voice neutral. Then she killed the net. Congrats, Ortiz said quietly. Now he definitely noticed you. He can notice me, Lynn said, eyes still on the trail. They can't notice Kilo. Almost as if the enemy had heard her, one of the men below lifted a handheld radio to his mouth. He said something short. From deeper in the trees, northwest of the village, she caught a flicker of movement, then another. More bodies shifting into place. So that's not just a local security team, Ortiz murmured. That's them reacting. Yeah. Lynn's throat tightened. The enemy was coordinating, which meant they either suspected a patrol was coming or they had a tip that coalition forces were moving. Either way, this bend was becoming a net. She put her eye to the scope, dialed to bring the nearest fighter's chest into focus. She could kill him easily. He was outside the village boundary, weapon present. ROE would back her. Hostile intent. But a dead insurgent before Kilo even arrived might spook the rest, make them break contact and call forward. Better to let the SEALs skirt them clean, if the SEALs actually got the message. Think they heard it? Ortiz asked, meaning Kilo. They heard something, Lynn said. Question is whether it was enough. As if to answer, a far-off murmur reached them, faint, damped by trees, the kind of sound a small, well-trained unit made moving through wet jungle. Not loud, not careless, just inevitable. The men on the bend pricked up slightly, turning their heads toward the sound. Lynn's jaw clenched. Come on, Bishop, take the westing. A minute passed. Then, through her scope, she saw it. Not on the trail, but just left of it, a shadow of movement where no movement should be. Kilo had shifted. The warning had made it through. They diverted, she breathed. Nice, Ortiz said, letting some tension go. Down below, the fighters frowned, listening to nothing. One spoke into his radio again. From the village direction, two more insurgents appeared, this pair heavier, one carrying that same long tube, the other with binoculars. "They're expanding the net," Lynn said, "even with the detour." So the trail wasn't the only kill zone. Yeah, she felt the realization drop into place. This was a funnel, not the trap. Which meant the real ambush was set deeper, closer to where Kilo actually needed to go. She pulled back from the scope, eyes narrowing toward the village they couldn't fire into without Harris. The storm growled overhead, flattening the jungle into one sodden mass. Their warning had bought Kilo space, but the enemy was still closing. The first shots came in a flat, mean burst, short enough to be disciplined, close enough that Lynn could hear the crack snap over the rain. It wasn't warning fire, it was aimed. "Contact," Ortiz said, already on glass. "Southwest of village, 50 meters off the trail, multiple." Lynn swung her rifle, the wet stock familiar under her cheek. Through the scope, she caught the scene unfolding in layers. Kilo, now offset west per her warning, moving in a staggered file, muzzle flashes from a thicket just ahead of them, and worst of all, two shapes in village clothing farther back, staring from the edge of a raised hut. Non-combatants or looky-loos, too close to the line of fire. Her earpiece hissed alive. "Kilo in contact. Small arms, requesting immediate suppression north of red line." Bishop's voice, still calm but breathing harder. Almost on top of his call, Harris cut in from Rook, thin and precise. "All stations, ROE remains in effect. No fire into structures. PID hostile before engaging near village perimeter." Lynn almost laughed, bitter, tight. Nobody out here needed the reminder less than she did. "Copy ROE," she said automatically, eyes never leaving the scope. The ambush team had positioned well, one element firing frontally to fix, another sliding to Kilo's right to rake them as they took cover. Kilo reacted fast. One seal dropped behind a buttress root, another moved to flank, but the enemy had the advantage of being already dug in. What made it uglier was the backdrop. Beyond the firing point, through gaps in wet leaves, she saw a woman pulling a child into a doorway. If Lynn missed, or if the round punched through, that doorway was where it would go. "Shooter, I've got spotter in a tree crotch giving directions," Ortiz said, voice low, tight. "If you drop him, fire discipline goes to hell for them." "Mark him." "Bearing from you, 290, elevated black cap." Lynn found him. The man was halfway up a low tree, not well camouflaged, radio in hand, arm pointing toward Kilo. He wasn't shooting, so by strictest reading of ROE he was in that gray band, enabling, but not actively hostile. If she let him live, he would keep correcting the ambush onto the seals. If she killed him, she could argue hostile intent later. Down below, a seal's suppressed rifle barked, and leaf fragments jumped near the ambushers. Return fire stitched the mud within inches of him. That was too close. Seconds like this in a jungle fight bled into casualties. "Taking the spotter," Lynn said. She settled the crosshair on the man's sternum. Rain wobbled the image. Wind shivered the leaves. Distance wasn't long, but the angle and interference made it trickier than a range shot. She exhaled, took up slack, and pressed. The suppressed M110 thumped against her shoulder, soft and decisive. Through the scope, she saw the round, hit, center mass, snapping the radio from his hand. He toppled, arms splaying, disappearing into green. The effect was immediate. The ambush fire faltered. Two shooters in the thicket instinctively looked toward where he'd been, breaking their rhythm. Kilo used the gap. One seal bounded left, another threw a smoke canister that puked white into the wet air, complicating the enemy's sightlines. In her ear, Harris came back, sharper. Overwatch. Confirmed target was armed. Negative, target was directing hostile fire. Hostile intent, vicinity of friendly forces, Lynn said, keeping it professional. She could almost hear him grinding his teeth across kilometers of jungle. Ortiz didn't comment. She was already scanning deeper. New guys, east of the village palisade. Heavier tube. Lynn shifted. What she saw made her stomach dip. Two insurgents were trotting up from the village edge, one carrying an RPG-7-style launcher, the other a satchel of rockets. They were moving toward a position with a clean oblique on where Kilo had taken cover. RPG team inbound, Lynn said. If they set, Kilo's cover is gone. Rook to Overwatch, you will not fire into the village. Harris snapped, misreading where the RPG was headed. They're outside the huts, sir, Lynn said, eyes locked on the team. If they get one off... Below, Kilo's smoke began to thin in the rain. The RPG team saw it too and sped up. The ambush hadn't died with her shot. It had just decided to hit harder. The RPG team kept coming, bent under the weight of the tube and rockets, rain streaking off their shoulders. They were just outside the line of huts, skirting the village, careful not to spook the civilians. That told Lynn they knew coalition rules. Stay near people. Make the Americans hesitate. Kilo, Overwatch, she transmitted. RPG team maneuvering from your east. Break. Recommend you displace South 10, smoke, and move. Bishop's reply came through choppy. Already pinned, taking fire from can't. Then static. She switched to Rook. Rook, Overwatch, Kilo is fixed and RPG is closing. Request immediate fires, danger close, grid to follow. She read the grid clean, like on a range. RPG is not inside structures. Repeat, not inside. Rook's operations NCO answered, not Harris. The man sounded harried, lines humming behind him. Overwatch. Negative on fires at this time. Air is grounded. Mortars would be through village airspace. We need CDR's approval. Then put the commander on, Lynn said, sharper than she meant. Stand by. Stand by. The two ugliest words when men were dying. Below, the seals tried to shift. One threw another smoke, but the rain ate it. Another exchanged fire with the original thicket, buying a second for his buddy to move. They were good, disciplined, aggressive, but they were also six, and the enemy now knew it. The tubes, setting, Ortiz said. He's finding an angle. Lynn looked through her scope. The RPG gunner was kneeling behind a low stump, assistant gunner helping him shoulder the launcher. The line he was taking wasn't perfect on Kilo's current position, but a few steps left, and he'd have it. Behind him, a teenage boy with a basket froze, eyes wide. One bad shot and command would have footage of a kid at the edge of her kill. Her earpiece popped again. Harris this time. Overwatch Rook, you will hold fire until I clear it. We do not have PID that excludes civilian spillover. UAV is cycling back up now. They won't be alive when it cycles, Lynn said. She didn't raise her voice, but some of it bled through anyway. Sir, Kilo cannot maneuver with that tube in play. Captain, you are to hold, Harris insisted. ROE is not optional. In the tree, rain ran off the bill of her cap, onto her cheek, down to the stalk. Lynn swallowed. This was the fork. A year ago she'd waited, obeyed, and they'd carried a man out white-lipped. She'd memorized the timestamps on that AR, 39 seconds between her hesitation and the casualty. She looked at Kilo now. They didn't have 39 seconds. She muted Rook. "He's not on the ground," she said to Ortiz. "He can't see what we see." Ortiz's jaw worked. "If you shoot, he'll hang it on you." "If I don't shoot, I'll hang it on myself," Lynn said. She settled back behind the rifle. The RPG gunner was almost set, leaning forward, assistant gunner turning to look for a clear background, unintentionally giving her a glimpse of empty space behind them, a gap in the huts, cleanest shot she was going to get. "Spot," she said. "I've got you," Ortiz said immediately, scope steady. Wind negligible under canopy, hold high chest. Lynn flicked her radio back to Kilo's frequency, just for them. "Kilo, overwatch, stand by for shot." No answer. Either they didn't hear, or they were too busy returning fire. She brought the crosshair to the gunner's upper torso, compensating for the downward angle and the wet. The jungle around her narrowed. No rain, no command, no career, just target, and the 6 men it threatened. "This is the right call," Ortiz said quietly, as if granting absolution. "It had better be," Lynn murmured. She took in a breath, let it out slow, the way she'd done 1,000 times on sterile ranges and half a dozen times in ugly alleys. Finger took up the slack. Somewhere in her ear, faint and angry, Harris said, "Overwatch, do not—" She pressed the trigger. The shot she'd just taken cracked through the wet air like a muted punch. Through the scope, Captain Lin Vo watched the RPG gunner jerk backward, launcher skidding from his shoulder. The assistant gunner dove for cover, confused. For a heartbeat, the whole firefight stuttered. Kilos. Position. The ambushers in the thicket. Even the villagers peering out from doorways. Then the enemy adapted. "New leader south of your last," Ortiz hissed. "By the fence, he's grabbing a kid." Lynn swung, heart already climbing. At the village edge, just beyond the no-fire line Harris had drawn in her ear an hour ago, a man in rain-dark fatigues yanked a teenage boy forward, not quite a human shield, more like an anchor he could claim later. "See, I was with civilians." With his free hand he waved, shouting toward the ambush element, rallying them, pointing at where Kilo was still hunkered. He wasn't holding a gun, not yet. But behind him, propped against the fence, was another tube. If he got that up, if he sent even a bad rocket into the tree line where Kilo had taken cover, someone would disappear. Her earpiece spat Harris's voice, tinny with rage. "Overwatch, you fired without clearance. You will hold." "Sir, they will die," Lynn said, eyes never leaving the scope. The man hauled the boy closer, using him to mask his torso. It was almost clever. He wasn't inside a structure so technically outside the strictest prohibition, but the risk to a non-combatant was obvious. The ROE, as written, said no. The situation on the ground said yes. Below, one of the SEALs shouted, "RPG, RPG," in that flat operator bark that meant they'd seen it too, but had no angle. Lynn ran the math fast. Range, just under 300. Angle, shallow, but rain would still slow the round slightly. She could take a high shoulder shot, try to drop him sideways, away from the boy. But if he flinched... Ortiz seemed to read her mind. "Take him high. You're good enough." "ROE says no," Lynn said, throat dry. "Kilo says yes," Ortiz shot back. That was the choice then, the one this whole deployment had been walking her toward. Obey and fail, or take the shot and own it. She settled the crosshair at the man's exposed collarbone, the place not fully covered by the boy, trusting her rifle, trusting her hands. This was where the hours on the range and the shame of the old AAR came to bear. She let the rain become background, let Harris's scolding buzz fade. She fired. The suppressed report was a soft cough in the tree. Down below, the round hit high, exactly where she'd aimed. The man's hand flew open, fingers splaying. The boy fell sideways, unhurt, scrambling away toward the hut. The man dropped against the fence, not dead yet, but no longer commanding, no longer reaching for the tube. For 2 precious seconds, the enemy lines wavered. No one was pointing, no one was calling adjustments. Kilo used it like they'd trained for that exact beat. 2 operators bounded out of their cover, moving low and fast to a better position. Another laid down precise, suppressed fire into the original thicket, and this time the insurgents broke, losing the confidence that had come from being directed. "Kilo, Overwatch, RPG neutralized," Lynn called, voice steady now. "You're green to maneuver south." Bishop's voice came back, clearer than before, adrenaline under control. "Copy, Overwatch. Nice shot. We're moving?" Nice shot. 2 words that told her she'd done exactly what the men on the ground needed. In her other ear, though, the storm cloud voice of Madge. "Harris. Overwatch Rook. You directly violated ROE with non-combatant in proximity. You will maintain position and prepare for debrief on return. Acknowledge." Lynn swallowed, tracking Kilo as they peeled away from the kill zone, moving toward safer jungle. The enemy fire was already thinning. Without a leader and without the heavy weapon, the insurgents didn't want to stay in a losing gunfight. "Overwatch acknowledges," she said at last. She let the rifle rest against the netting and finally felt the tremor in her left hand. She flexed it, slow. Ortiz watched her, eyes softer now. "You saved them." "Yeah," Lynn said. The word came out on a breath. "And I gave him everything he needs to burn me." Ortiz shrugged one shoulder. "Then we walk in tall." Below, through sheets of rain, she saw Kilo disappear into the trees, alive because she'd chosen wrong by the book and right by the ground. The fight was over. The reckoning was next. Fob Rook smelled of wet canvas, JP8, and paperwork. The firefight might as well have been on another planet. Captain Lin Vo sat in front of the folding table in the debrief tent, rain jacket unzipped, hair still damp from the flight back. Her rifle case leaned against the chair leg like an accusation. Maja Harris didn't sit. He stood behind the table, tablet in hand, scrolling. A comms tech sat off to the side with headphones, replaying transmissions as needed. Ortiz stood behind Lynn's shoulder, not ordered to be there, but refusing to leave. "Let's start simple," Harris said. His voice was flat, controlled, which was worse than outright anger. "At time 0532 local, you engaged a subject at the village perimeter who was partially obscured by a non-combatant. ROE Section 3, Paragraph 2, prohibits fires that create unreasonable risk to civilians in proximity." Lynn finished, because she had it memorized, too. "Yes, sir." "You fired anyway?" "Yes, sir." He tapped the tablet. "Before we get to that, we're going to walk the whole thing. Your first unauthorized act was in the approach phase, over-transmitting in a window, giving Kilo a detour. That over-transmit kept them off the kill bend," Lynn said, keeping her tone even. "Maybe," Harris said. "Or maybe it told the enemy there was a forward element in play. You were on the net long enough for anyone with a halfway decent radio to triangulate." Ortiz stepped in. "Sir, ambient noise and storm would have made..." Harris held up a hand without looking at her. "I'm talking to your captain." Lynn felt Ortiz go quiet, heat in the air behind her. "Sir," Lynn said, "I judged in the moment that the clarity was worth the risk. Kilo got the message. They diverted. That's a positive outcome." The fact that you keep getting positive outcomes does not make the method acceptable, Harris said. We work with partners. We work around villages. We have to be predictable in our compliance. Predictable in our compliance. Not in our protection, she thought. She didn't say it. He swiped again. Then we get to the contact. You engaged a spotter who was not visibly armed. He was actively directing hostile fire onto friendly forces, Lynn said. Hostile intent. Within ROE. Harris inclined his head. The smallest concession. Defensible. Aggressive, but defensible. He brought up the next timestamp. On the recording, faint under rain, her own voice came through. Kilo, Overwatch, stand by for shot. Then Harris's. Overwatch, do not. And then the soft report of her rifle that the helicopter crew had said they couldn't even hear from the air. This is the problem, he said, looking up. You heard a lawful order to hold, and you fired. If I had held, Lynn said, we would be adding names to a casualty log right now. You don't know that. I do, she said, and some of the jungle leaked into her voice. I had eyes on the tube. I had eyes on Kilo. I had eyes on the kid. I made the calculation in real time. From where you were sitting, sir, you couldn't make it. From where I was, I couldn't not. Silence. The comms tech glanced between them, then looked back at his screen. Harris set the tablet down. Do you understand what happens when this goes above me? They will see a captain, on probation for a previous hesitation-related incident, who then decides she can rewrite ROE on the fly. That destroys confidence in this task force. Ortiz couldn't hold it. With respect, sir, it also shows a captain who kept 6 Americans alive. He turned to her. And did you, Staff Sergeant, advise her to fire? Ortiz's mouth pressed into a line. This was the moment where Lynn could make it easy. Say no. Say she acted alone. Say her spotter had tried to rein her in. Lynn didn't. She backed my shot, she said. This is on me. Harris studied her for several seconds. Some of the iron came out of his shoulders. Not forgiveness, more like recognition. You're not stupid, he said at last. You knew exactly what I told you and you did it anyway. Yes, sir. Fine. He picked up the tablet again and flicked to a different report. Here's the piece that complicates it. Intel pulled 2 captured handsets off the Kilo objective. One of them had a preloaded contact photo of a woman in U.S. uniform, in the trees. Not a real photo. Crude sketch, code name in their language. Translated notes call you the tree shooter. Lynn blinked. Me? Or our capability? But today they did exactly what you feared. They pushed the fight to the edge of the village to make us hesitate. Which means they knew, coming in, that we'd have someone like you close. So the ambush was bait, Ortiz said quietly. Looks that way, Harris said. Which means your existence in the battle space is now a variable I have to manage. You become predictable. They build for you. That landed harder than any reprimand, being needed and being a liability in the same breath. So what now, sir? Lynn asked. You pull me? Harris looked at her for a long moment. I draft a formal reprimand recommending review of your field autonomy, he said, and her stomach dropped, until he added, and I also state clearly that your actions contributed directly to Kilo's survival. Both go up. Let higher decide how much risk appetite they have. It wasn't vindication. It was honest. Lynn nodded. Understood. Don't mistake this for approval, Captain, he said, voice softening only a fraction. You did the right thing for the men on the ground, and the wrong thing for the book. That kind of officer gets heroes made and missions shut down. He closed the tablet. But the fact they were hunting a sniper means we hit a nerve. Intel wants to go after the node that planned it. You'll see that packet tomorrow. Tomorrow. They weren't done. Neither were the people in the jungle who now had a nickname for her. Outside, the rain eased, leaving just the generators humming. Ortiz touched Lynn's shoulder as they stepped out. "You could have thrown me under," she said. Lynn shook her head. "Then I'd have broken two things today." They walked back into the wet night, both knowing the next op was coming faster than any reprimand could catch up. The enemy had shown their hand. Now they had to find who taught them to play it. The intel shack at Fob Rook was a metal box that pretended to be an office. Maps taped to the walls, monitors humming. The air always a little too cold after jungle heat. Captain Linvo stood beside the central table while a young analyst in glasses, wiry, crew-cut, flipped through stills pulled off the captured handsets. "This is what Major Harris was talking about," he said, sliding one toward her. Local language tag, rough sketch. Tree shooter. Could just mean sniper. "They know we bring snipers." Lynn studied the image. The drawing was crude, but it showed a woman, hair tied back, rifle angled down from a high point. It wasn't just sniper, it was her day. "Do they usually gender their threat icons?" she asked. The analyst shrugged. Sometimes. Sometimes they use whatever stock art or icon they can find. Ortiz was leaning on a filing cabinet, arms crossed. "Funny how the stock art happened to be a woman in a tree on the exact night we put a woman in a tree." The intel chief, a captain with dark circles under his eyes, looked up from his laptop. "Look, I'm not saying you're wrong, Captain Vo. I'm saying insurgent TTPs in this district already include pulling a fight towards civilian cover. We've seen it 3 times. You might just have walked into their standard play." Lynn kept her tone calm. Then their standard play was unusually well-timed. She tapped the big map on the table. "We over-transmitted to Kilo here." Her finger landed north of the village, to warn them off the bend. 2 minutes after that, their secondary element reinforced the trail. Not the village, not the south. Exactly where we warned. "That could be them reacting to Kilo's offset," the intel chief said. "They might have heard the SEALs move." "Could," Lynn allowed. "But then we fired the spotter, and within 60 seconds the RPG team advanced from the village edge. If their only goal was to push Kilo into the village, they'd have waited for us to shoot into a hut so they could scream collateral. Instead, they rushed a heavy weapon into an exposed lane, right where an overwatch would be forced to engage." Ortiz nodded. "They were trying to force the captain to break ROE." The analyst hesitated. "That's more elaborate than most cells here." "Because it's not just the village cell," Lynn said. "Whoever texted this." She held up the handset still, knew we'd deploy a close human shooter if the weather killed the drone. That's not basic guerrilla. That's someone watching us, maybe even listening. She looked over at Harris, who had come in halfway through and was listening from the doorway, arms folded. "Sir, if they know we default to Canopy snipers in bad weather, they can build trap after trap. Next time they don't send an RPG, next time they send counter-sniper glass." The intel chief sighed, glanced at Harris, then back at the timestamps. "Okay, let's walk the comms." He pulled up the log on the screen. "Overwatch over-transmit, Kilo acknowledgement, enemy movement reported by Lynn, Lynn's first shot, enemy heavy weapon appearing." When they saw it laid out, the pattern tightened. "Yeah," the chief said at last, slower now. "That's reacting to you, not to them. It's like they wanted to stress test your ROE. Or degrade the only asset that saved Kilo, Ortiz said. You sideline her. We all go back to hoping the drone sees through trees. Harris pushed off the doorframe and came closer. His face was still stern, but there was interest behind it. We got anything from exploitation on where the handset traffic was routing? Preliminary, the chief said, spinning his laptop. Several SMS-style bursts bounced through a market town upriver before reaching the village handset. Same number appears in previous chatter about foreign shooters. If we hit that town, we might snag whoever's feeding TTPs. There, Lynn said. That's the node I was talking about. Harris looked at her. You realize what you're asking for, going upriver. Puts you in range again. Yes, sir, Lynn said. Which is why we hit it before they have time to build a proper counter-sniper team. Right now they're clever but sloppy. Give them a week, and they'll be patient. The intel chief nodded reluctantly. We can draft a target packet on the town tonight. Riverine approach is best. Limited civilian pattern at night. But ROE will be even tighter. Market area, higher population. Then we plan for isolation, Lynn said. Decoy, distraction, whatever it takes to peel the target away. Harris studied her a long moment, seeing, perhaps, that the very thing that made her dangerous to paperwork made her invaluable outside the wire. All right, he said finally. We brief a follow-on in the morning. You're on it, with stricter controls. It was half a win and half a sentence. Lynn felt both. As the others bent over the map, she looked again at the crude drawing of the woman in the tree. The enemy had given her a shape, which meant they'd be looking for that shape next time. The river looked like a strip of spilled ink under the moonless sky. Jungle walls leaned over it, branches dripping, turning the waterway into a tunnel. The two low-slung boats barely whispered as they nosed upstream, electric motors humming, hulls bumping off the occasional submerged log. Captain Linvo sat in the bow of the second boat beside Ortiz, NVGs down, rifle between her knees. Ahead of them, in the lead boat, Lieutenant Josh Bishop Keene crouched near the coxswain, scanning the banks with that restless operator stillness. Every now and then he glanced back, making sure the Overwatch team was there. It had taken an hour of arguing in the ops tent to win this seat. Captain Vo is under review, Harris had said, palms flat on the table. I'm not putting her forward on another high-sensitivity ROE target 24 hours later. Bishop hadn't even sat down. He'd just leaned in. With respect, sir, last time the weather killed your drone. That's not changing. If we're in tight streets, short vis, I want the person who actually pulled us out of it yesterday. You want the person who broke ROE. I want the person who saw what I couldn't. Two operators backing the same argument was hard to ignore. Harris had finally exhaled, long and annoyed. Fine. She goes. But you, he pointed at Lynn, are on a short leash. No fires without explicit hostile act. You will maintain radio windows. You will not play hero sniper for my benefit. Yes, sir, she'd said, and meant it. She could follow rules. She just needed rules that didn't let teams die. Now, on the river, the reprimand felt far away. The night smelled of mud and fern and old fish. The boat's wake was a low shh behind them. Overhead, clouds moved in thick bands, the same system that had sheltered the enemy yesterday. It would mess with exfil, too. Ortiz murmured in her ear, Tide chart gives us what, 40 minutes on the way out? 45 if the rain upstream slows the outflow, Lynn said. But yeah, not long. Limited extraction window. If they hit trouble in the town they were about to raid, they wouldn't get to loiter. Bishop's voice crackled in her earpiece. Low power, line of sight. Overwatch. How copy? Read you clear, Lynn whispered back. We'll peel off at the bend and find height. Copy. Target building should be on the north bank, 2 blocks in. Market structures, civilian pattern low at this hour. Intel says courier sleeps over the back room. We want him alive if he's there. Alive made ROE even tighter. Shots had to be surgical or not at all. They reached the bend, just a lazy curve in the river choked with overhanging roots. The lead boat kissed the bank, seals flowing off in dark shapes, weapons high, disappearing into the brush. Lynn and Ortiz followed, boots sinking in wet loam. The boats drifted back out, engines idling, ready to pick them up later, if they made it back. Building's not tall, Ortiz murmured, NVG's panning. We're not getting 30 feet unless we climb a palm. Palm won't hold both of us steady, Lynn said. She took in the alleys ahead, narrow corrugated roofs, stacked crates, a prayer flag limp in the damp. We go mid-height, 2-story shed there. They ghosted toward it, moving behind the seal file but offset enough to find their own perch. Lynn scaled the shed's side ladder, half-rotted but workable, and pulled Ortiz up behind her. From the roof they could see the lane leading to the target structure. A square, stuccoed building with a deep eave, one light on in back. Too calm. She settled prone, unrolled a small shooting mat, laid the M110 out. The town was tighter than the village, fewer open sight lines, more cover for anyone waiting. If the enemy really had been warned they were coming for the tree shooter, this was where they'd try again. Rook came in, faint, but there. Assault element, ROE update. No fires unless hostile act or clear hostile intent. Market area, repeat, market area. Copy, Bishop said immediately. We're going soft. Lynn exhaled. Soft entry, limited exfil, enemy possibly expecting them. Harris had given her the mission but made sure she couldn't repeat yesterday's sins. We can still work with hostile intent, Ortiz said quietly, like encouragement. Yeah, Lynn said. We just have to see it first. Down below, the seals stacked on the corner, one pausing to place a small camera, feeding back to Bishop. Lynn swept her scope across the opposite rooftops, looking for glint, for the wrong silhouette, for anyone paying too much attention to the dark lane. Nothing obvious, which in her experience meant it was going to get interesting fast. She keyed her mic, to Bishop this time. Overwatch in position. You are covered as much as terrain allows. Roger, he said, moving. They slipped into the town's throat, and the jungle, watching from the river's edge, seemed to lean closer. From the rooftop shed, Captain Lin Vo watched Bishop's men disappear into the target building's side entrance, shadows slipping past the weak backlight. The lane went quiet again. Just rain ticking on metal, river insects buzzing, a low dog bark somewhere deeper in town. Too quiet. Nothing on the opposite roofs, Ortiz murmured, scanning. Either they stayed home or they're really good. Let's assume really good, Lynn said. She swept her scope across the arc again, slower. The buildings here weren't tall, most 1 or 2 stories, with patched tin or clay roofs, water tanks, laundry lines. Good for a concealed shooter if he'd had time to rehearse. She thought about the handset, the sketch, the call-outs to tree shooter. If they were trying to stress test her, this would be the night to add a second layer. A faint pressure pricked at the back of her neck, the feeling of being inside someone else's glass. She froze, then shifted her scope not to where she expected a shooter, but to where an off-axis reflection might show up. places where a lens, badly shaded, could throw a soft glint even in this overcast. There. Not a bright flash, not a movie flare. Just a wrong, pale circle on a wet water tank 2 roofs over and slightly higher, like moonlight that shouldn't be there. "Got him," she whispered. 2 o'clock. Higher roof. East side. He's glassing this direction. Ortiz didn't. "Look at the target first." She looked at Lynn. "On you." RO ran through Lynn's head. No fires unless hostile act or clear hostile intent. A man with a scope trained on coalition forces in the middle of a raid? That met intent in her book. But if she shot from right here, from the same edge she'd been using, she'd confirm her exact position. If he'd set up properly, he might even be waiting for that. "We need a new angle," she said. Ortiz frowned. "You leave, Bishop loses eyes." "Not if I stay on the line," Lynn said, already calculating. The next roof over was slightly higher, connected by a narrow timber someone had thrown between the buildings. Risky in the wet, but it would give her a thin slice of view on the enemy sniper's flank. She keyed up, low power. "Assault Overwatch. You are still covered, but I'm shifting 2 meters east for better angle. If you take contact, call it fast." Bishop answered, equally low. "Copy, Overwatch. We're clearing rear room." Lynn slung the M110 tight, belly crawled to the roof edge, and swung onto the timber. Rain made it slick. Below, the alley was a black throat. She moved slow, weight-centered, rifle hugged to chest. Ortiz stayed back, spotting from the original perch, feeding whispers. "He hasn't fired," Ortiz said. "He's patient. That's bad." "Means he wants me," Lynn muttered. She reached the next roof, hauled herself up, and went prone again. This time lower silhouette, rifle out. From here the angle opened. She could see the enemy shooter's hide more clearly. He was on his stomach behind a parapet, cheek to his own optic, barrel through a torn piece of tarp to break outline. Local clothes, but the rifle wasn't local. Looked like a good bolt gun, maybe smuggled, with a scope decent enough to spot across roofs at night. He was shooting her profile, not the door Kilo had used. "Hostile intent confirmed," she said. "He's got me in glass." "Clear to engage," Ortiz replied without hesitation. It wasn't command authority, but it was the only one that mattered right then. She watched him a beat longer, waiting to see if he'd fire first. Then a flicker jerked across the lower street. A man stepped out at the corner, hand to ear, eyes up toward her roof. A spotter, so he wasn't alone. "Spotter on the street," she said. "He's coordinated. Definitely not random." Which meant if she shot and missed, they could return fire fast. No missing then. She set her crosshair just ahead of the shooter's ear to account for the little bit of tarp still hiding him. Wind negligible. Distance short enough that drop was minimal, but she added a hair of holdover for the angle. She fired. The suppressed blast rolled across the roof. Through the scope, she saw the enemy sniper's head snap to the side, blood misting, his firing shoulder kicking away from the rifle. Not a clean kill, he thrashed, rolling, hand going to his face. On the street, the spotter shouted up in the local dialect, pointing. A round cracked past where Lynn had been on the first roof, late, inaccurate, but exactly where she would have been if she hadn't shifted. "They had you dialed," Ortiz breathed. "If you'd stayed." "I know." The wounded sniper tried to crawl behind the parapet. Lynn fired again, lower this time, punching into his shoulder to keep him down without risking overshoot into the street. He went still. Below, Bishop's voice came in, calm but urgent. "Overwatch, Kilo has the package. Movement in the market waking up. We're X-filing to boats. Overwatch copies. Counter-sniper disrupted. You're green on the lane. She kept her scope on the rooftop a moment longer, watching for any second team, any late muzzle. Nothing. Only then did she let herself feel it. The sharp, electric satisfaction of meeting someone who'd studied her and beating him anyway. But under it, colder, was the confirmation she hadn't wanted. He had been ready for her exact perch. Someone out there was updating the playbook in real time. It was morning at Fob Rook, the kind that came gray and heavy after a night river run. The helipad still smelled of wet rotors. Captain Lin Vo walked straight from the flight line to the command shelter, helmet dangling, rifle cleared. Her clothes were still damp where the boat spray had reached under her rain top. Maggie Harris was already there, uniform crisp despite the hour, coffee cooling beside his tablet. He'd clearly been up watching their feed. On the screen behind him, frozen in grainy infrared, was the moment she'd shot the enemy sniper off the rooftop. He didn't make her wait. "Sit down, Captain." She did. Ortiz started to follow, but Harris shook his head. "This is CO to officer." Ortiz lingered just long enough to catch Lin's eye. "You good?" Then backed out. Harris turned the tablet toward her. A form was open, all caps and boxes. "Administrative reprimand, draft," he said. "I can send this as is. If I do, it follows you." Lin looked at it. The language was clinical. Failure to adhere to commander's ROE guidance. Pattern of risk acceptance. Potential to undermine partnered operations. It was all true in the narrow way paperwork told the truth. "Sir," she said, "we brought everyone back. We got the courier. We disrupted whoever was trying to kill me. That's 2 for 2. And 2 for 2 on you deciding you know better than the person with the US flag on his desk," he said, not angry, just tired. "That's the problem." She kept her hands linked on the table so he wouldn't see her flex them. "With respect, sir, I didn't decide I knew better. I decided I knew more, because I was the only one with eyes on." Harris tilted his head. "Explain. Intent of the mission," she said. "Not the wording, the intent. Keep Kilo alive to finish dismantling the cell. Yesterday, the fastest path to that intent was shooting the RPG and the commander even though ROE was tight. Tonight, the fastest path was neutralizing the counter-sniper so Kilo could exit. I didn't do it to grandstand. I did it because from where I lay, there wasn't another move." He watched her while she spoke, weighing whether this was defiance or clarity. "You're not reckless," he said finally. "That's what makes this harder. If you were reckless, I could bounce you and sleep fine. I'm not trying to make your life harder, sir." "Oh, you are," he said dryly. "Because Hire saw the village footage. They saw the boy in frame. They also saw 6 Americans walk away. That creates discussions." "So write that," Lin said. "Write that I violated ROE in order to fulfill mission intent and preserve friendly lives. Don't write that I did it for myself. That's not how they like it written." "Then write it for me," she said quietly. That got him. A corner of his mouth twitched. Not amusement, but recognition of backbone. He picked up the tablet, and in front of her, deleted 2 lines. Replaced them with, "Acted on real-time tactical assessment to prevent likely friendly casualties. Deviation acknowledged." He set the stylus down. "This will still sting. You will still brief ROE with me before every op. You will not freelance comm windows." "Yes, sir." He leaned back. "What you proved last night is that the enemy wasn't guessing. That sniper was waiting right where our position should have been. If you hadn't shifted, I'd be writing 2 condolence letters and a very different report. That's why we have to hit whoever is feeding them, Lynn said, before they try again. Next time they might put a kid on the roof. We're already building it, Harris said. He tapped the desk, pulling up a satellite image of a riverside clearing deeper inland. Source house, logistics for the cell that staged the village fight and the town overwatch. Less civilian clutter, but they've got a gathering on the calendar. Some kind of local festival. ROE will be no fire unless hostile act. Of course it would. You're sending me? I said you get one last chance, he said. This is it. We roll fast before word of last night works its way upriver. Lynn nodded. Then I'll make it clean. Make it clean, he repeated. Show me you can choose restraint as well as aggression. I need to be able to tell Hire you're not just a gun. She stood. Sir, for what it's worth, I appreciate you didn't just bench me. I didn't do it for you, Harris said. I did it for the men who keep asking for you. That landed deeper than any praise. Outside, as she stepped back into the sticky morning, Ortiz was waiting under the awning. Well? Ortiz asked. He's still mad, Lynn said. But he's still sending us. Ortiz grinned, wolfish. Then we pack. Ahead of them was a final target, a tighter ROE, and the chance to prove she could win without crossing the line. Or prove she couldn't. By late afternoon, the river compound sounded alive. Drums, laughter, the high chatter of kids. From her overwatch in a cluster of bamboo and palm above the clearing, Captain Lin Vo could see why Intel had flagged this window as hard. Families had come in from up and down the river to trade and drink under string lights. Boats bumped the bank. Women carried trays through the open courtyard. It was the exact environment Hire built ROE for. And somewhere in that courtyard, wearing local cloth over a radio earpiece, was the fixer who'd paid men to drag a fight to a village and to lay a sniper on a town roof for her. Targets in the north quadrant, Ortiz whispered beside her, glass to eye. Tan shirt, gray scarf, talking to the guy with the ledger. Lynn found him through her scope. Average height, tidy beard, posture of someone who thought he was safe. He stood under a canvas awning that kept off the sun, which also kept off any angle from above. A child darted past him with a toy, nearly clipping his knee. ROE. No fire. Below, Bishop's reduced element waited in the trees, close enough to rush, but not to be seen. This raid was deliberately small. Too many armed foreigners, and the whole festival would panic. Rook came over the net. Harris himself. All stations, ROE in effect. No fires unless hostile act. Objective is HVI Alpha. Capture preferred. Lethal authorized only with clean background. Overwatch copies, Lynn said. She watched the fixer for a full minute. He moved easily, accepted a cup, tipped his head back to drink. No sign he knew the task force was already in the tree line. If she waited till dark, he might withdraw into a house with walls. If she acted now, she'd violate exactly what Harris had just rewritten for her. He's comfortable, Ortiz said. He's going to leave before dusk, probably upriver. Yeah, Lynn said quietly. And once he's upriver, he disappears. And then this cycle, baiting her, baiting the task force, would repeat. She thought back to what Harris had said. Show me you can choose restraint as well as aggression. Fine. Let's give him a reason to move, she murmured, Ortiz's mouth curved. Distraction? Small one. They had prepped for this. Ortiz eased out a compact timer and a smoke canister from her pack. Non-lethal, commercial-looking. She wriggled lower, belly crawled to a point where she could lob it downslope toward the eastern edge of the compound, away from the densest cluster of families. "On your call," Ortiz whispered. Lynn tracked the fixer through her scope. He'd turned toward the river, talking to a man with a phone, maybe checking schedules for a boat. Perfect. "Do it," Lynn said. Ortiz tossed. The canister arced through foliage and landed behind a stack of crates near the cook fire. A second later, it began to puke thick white smoke, hissing. The effect was immediate but not panicked. People startled, called out. A few children squealed with delighted confusion. Two men went to check, waving smoke away. Crucially, the fixer stepped out from under his awning to get a better look, instinctively moving away from the crowd. "Target shifting, east, east," Lynn said. "He's out from cover." Bishop came in, ready. "If you can take him clean, take him. We're moving." The fixer paused near the edge of the courtyard, back to the building, smoke to his right, a clear slice of wall behind him. No civilians in the line. This was the shot she'd promised Harris she could wait for. She exhaled, settled the crosshair at the base of the man's neck, enough to drop him without throwing him backward into the crowd. Suppressed M110, known distance, minimal wind in the lee of the compound. She fired. The round hit like a finger flicking a switch. The fixer folded straight down, legs gone. For 2 seconds, no one realized what had happened. Too much noise, too much smoke. Then someone screamed. "Target down," Lynn said. "Clean background. Bishop, you're green." The seal element burst from the tree line, moving like a knife, two securing the fallen HVI, one posting outward, another pushing people back with his free hand, weapon low to avoid spooking civilians. They worked fast, practiced, grab, confirm, drag. Now the compound realized something was wrong. Men shouted. A few grabbed old rifles. One pointed across the river, yelling about foreigners. "Overwatch, we have movement from the south huts," Ortiz said. 3 armed. "Not shooting yet." "Hostile act only," Lynn said, reminding herself as much as Ortiz. "We are not here to start a war." Bishop came back on. "Package recovered. Moving to boats." Lynn scanned for anyone raising a weapon toward the seals. One man did, angry, scared, bringing the barrel up too high. That was hostile act. She dropped him with a shoulder shot, non-lethal looking from a distance, enough to spin him and make him rethink. "Shooter, that was righteous," Ortiz said. "The rest we leave," Lynn said. Below, Bishop's team disappeared back into green, burdened but intact. The fixer's body slung between 2 men. The compound roiled, but no organized chase formed. Too many civilians, too much confusion. On the river, engines coughed to life. "Rook, overwatch," Lynn transmitted. "HVI neutralized, no collateral, assault X-filing." There was a pause, then Harris. "Copy, overwatch. That's how it's supposed to look." The words slid through her like cool water. She'd proved it. She could be sharp without cutting the wrong target. Now they just had to get out before the river closed. Fob Rook was busier than usual at dusk. The boats had come back wet and loud, engines growling as they hit the ramp, seals jumping off with the body-bagged fixer, and one local man with a through-and-through to the shoulder, yelling in shock. Medics hustled him toward the aid station, shouting vitals. Overhead, the storm was finally breaking, letting a strip of angry orange sky bleed through the clouds. Captain Lin Vo stood off to the side of the ramp, helmet tucked under her arm, watching the organized chaos. No one was shouting at her. No one was praising her either. The raid had been clean, almost textbook. That meant there wasn't much to say. Ortiz came up beside her, chewing on a protein bar. "We did all right," she said. "We did what we were supposed to do," Lynn said. "That too." Across the yard, Madge Harris was talking to the intel chief, tablet in hand again, likely pushing the HVI neutralized minimal disturbance message up the chain. He saw Lynn, gave a small nod, acknowledgement, not invitation, and went back to his conversation. There it was, the split. Operators would remember the shots, admin would remember the forms. Down by the boats, the SEALs had clustered near the benches outside the mess, still in half-wet gear, helmets off, laughing that relieved, post-contact laugh. Bishop sat on a crate, boots muddy, talking with his comms man. When he noticed Lynn standing alone near the Hescos, he raised his chin, a clear "come over." She hesitated a second. Officers didn't always sit in the mud with operators, especially not officers under review. She could go to her hooch, type up her AAR, keep it clean. But the AAR wouldn't remember that RPG, or the kid, or the man in the scarf. The people who would remember were over there. She crossed. As she approached, one of the younger SEALs, face still streaked where rain had cut through camo, grinned. "There she is, Tree Gunner," he said, deliberately butchering some nickname he'd clearly heard secondhand. "Please don't make that a thing," Lynn said, but her mouth was already betraying her. Bishop scooted over on the crate so she could lean against the Hesco. "Figured you'd go straight to the major," he said. "I already got the look," she said. "He's happy, in his way." "Yeah, well, we're happy in ours." Bishop's expression sobered. "That shot today? Cleanest thing I've seen all month. You waited. I know you were itching." "I was," she admitted. "But I also like being employed." The SEAL who'd been closest to the RPG in the village, the one who'd almost eaten that rocket, raised his water bottle toward her. "Still breathing because of you, ma'am. Twice." Lynn accepted the thanks quietly. This, more than any line on her OER, was the proof she'd needed, that the people exposed to the bullets thought she'd done right. Ortiz flopped down on a bench. "You guys don't see the way she death stares the ROE page before missions," she said, "like she's trying to make it blink first." "It blinked today," Bishop said, "in the right direction." They talked a little about the fixer, how easy he'd gone down, how quickly the crowd had gotten confused. They didn't talk about the earlier ops, the ones with the gray shots. They didn't need to. Shared danger smoothed the edges. A runner in base utilities came hustling up, breathless. "Captain Vo?" Lynn straightened. "Here." He held out a plastic-wrapped folder. "From the S1, came over from Rear Command, marked priority for you and the Major." Paperwork always found the quiet moments. "Thanks," she said, taking it. Bishop caught the label. "Orders, Personnel Action." He raised an eyebrow. "Good news?" "We'll see," Lynn said. She didn't open it right there. She let herself stay a few more minutes in the circle of men who'd called her when no one else answered. They talked gear, and someone made fun of Ortiz's rope work, and someone else said they'd never trust drones again. Only when the sky had gone properly dark did she step under a floodlight and slit the packet open. Inside was exactly what she expected and didn't. The formal reprimand, signed but softened, and beneath it, a memo recommending continued operational employment in roles requiring elevated judgment under restrictive ROE, pending commanding officer approval. Harris's signature sat at the bottom. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Behind her, the base generators kicked to a higher whine, and the jungle went back to being a black wall beyond the wire. The war outside the village hadn't changed, but now at least, she knew she hadn't shot herself out of it. Tomorrow she'd find out if the higher commander agreed. The rain came back that night, harder than before, drumming on the roofs and smearing the floodlights into halos. Captain Lin Vo sat at the small desk in her hooch, packet spread open, reading every line even though she'd already skimmed it outside. The reprimand was formal, unromantic. Deviation from commander's ROE, mitigating factor of imminent friendly loss of life. Recommendation for additional review. It would live in her file. No getting around that. The second sheet was the one that mattered. Given demonstrated ability to operate effectively in low visibility, high collateral risk environments, recommend continued assignment to direct Overwatch roles within task force, subject to commanding officer concurrence. He'd done exactly what she'd asked in the debrief, told the whole truth. She'd broken the line, and she'd done it to save people. She closed the folder and headed back through the rain to the command shelter. Maj Harris was alone inside, reading on his tablet, sleeves rolled. He looked up when she entered. Figured you'd be in tonight. I wanted to talk before you sent it up, she said, holding up the folder. It's going up, he said. I put my name on it. I know. I just want to be clear on my ask. He set the tablet down. All right, ask. I don't want the transfer, she said. The lateral to training company, the staff billet, whatever they're going to float. I want to stay on Overwatch. With this unit. Harris watched her, expression unreadable. You realize staff is how a lot of officers survive this kind of paper. Lynn said. I'm trying to outgrow it. Sir, she stepped closer, so she didn't have to raise her voice over the rain. I know I make you nervous. I know every time I go forward, you have to wonder if I'm going to put you in front of a camera. But the teams fight better when I'm there. They ask for me, and I can follow your ROE. You saw that today. He let that hang for a moment, then nodded slowly. I did. So let me keep doing it, she said. Let me do it right. He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling for a second, listening to the rain. When he looked at her again, some of that permanent tension had eased. You're a pain in the ass, Captain, he said. Yes, sir. But you're our pain in the ass. He reached for the personnel action, scrolled to the command concurrence line, and with a stylus signed his name. There. If higher wants to yank you, they can. My recommendation is stay, under supervision. Thank you, she said, and meant it. Don't make me regret it. I'll try not to, he snorted. Get some sleep. Weather clears tomorrow. We'll be flying again. Outside, the jungle was just a wall of blackened water. She walked back to her hooch, feeling raw and steady at once. The thing she'd been trying to prove since the first op, the thing that had driven every too-long transmission and every hard shot, was finally settled. She wasn't the captain who hesitated and lost a man anymore. She was the captain who fired and took the heat. The next day, morning came pale and bright. The storm wrung out. A patrol bird needed eyes on a stretch of jungle trail where insurgent runners had been spotted. Nothing dramatic, just another day of work. Lynn climbed in with her kit, Ortiz at her side. As the bird swung low over the green, the canopy shivered with sunlight instead of rain. They were set down on a rise, familiar, damp, high enough to see. She climbed, found her perch, laid out the M110, and listened to the living noise of the jungle. No gunfight, no screaming, just leaves and distant river. This time, there was no one making her do it. She was here because she'd asked to be.